All right. Well, we are live. You caught us talking. It's okay. It's okay.
Aren't we always? Aren't we always?
Right. We're always saying good stuff anyway. So
Yes,
it is.
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's right. This is a live episode of Race Matters, and we are on Wednesday, the 24th of August, 2022. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for this live broadcast. We have a great show in store for you tonight, entitled Understanding Interracial Relationships. Haven't you wondered, if you have not been in one, what it was like? What type of interactions does the couple have? How are others taking to them or not because of the climate and the nature of race in the society in which we live? So we have someone here tonight. We have Zyda Mellon here tonight as our special guest, who is in an interracial marriage. And so she is going to talk about how that is and answer our questions and any questions that you may have. And also, too, if you have any feedback because you are or have been in an interracial relationship, we would love for you to share your information in the chat. And we will drop the link in the chat later on in the show. And if you want to actually come on the panel with us and share some of your experiences because you were in or are in an interracial relationship, we would love to hear from you. It's not just about what we have to say. We are engaging here on this platform called YouTube. But not only that, this is Full Life Communications, and the show is called Race Matters. It is Facebook as well. We simulcast on both. So I really wasn't wrong with just trying to, get YouTube out there. But also, Race Matters is a safe place to have the hard conversation. So we pride ourselves in that because what we say it in love, even if we disagree. So that is the difference that we try to make on this platform, having this sometimes sensitive and difficult conversation when we talk about race. So please do join us tonight for this all-important conversation about interracial relationships and understanding them a little bit better by those who have experienced it. I want to say thank you to Egypt and Rosie and Mariana for being my co-hosts and joining me on this platform. I truly appreciate your dedication and desire to be host with me to get out this information that's so necessary for the public. So thank you all. And how are you tonight, co-hosts?
Good.
Doing good.
Yeah, good. Excited for this conversation.
So am I. I've been looking forward to it for a while. Zyda knows because she and I have been talking about it for a while.
Yes.
And so without further ado, welcome Zyda Mellon, our guest tonight.
Woohoo! Thank you for having me.
So Zyda, let's just start about with you giving us some information, whatever it is that you care to share, background information, present information, however, just so the audience just can get to know a little bit about you.
Yes, so I am Zyda Mellon, formerly Zyda Culpepper, which was my maiden name. I currently live in South Carolina, but I grew up in Alabama, went to University of Alabama for undergrad, University of Maryland for grad school. University of Alabama is actually where I met my husband. We existed on complete opposite ends of the campus. So how we ended up meeting each other is very funny. But I currently teach piano lessons and do a group choir class for elementary school children in South Carolina / Georgia, and really love what I do. I got my degrees in music, so being able to have a job in music as well is super fulfilling for me. I love to crochet. I don't know if there's any fiber arts lovers out there who are going to be tuning in, but I love a good crochet project, blankets, sweaters, all of that kind of stuff. That's a little bit about me.
You're into cooking too, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I have a cooking Instagram that I haven't.
I know that IG page is like that stuff.
Yeah, Mellon.
I know.
We need to put that link up.
Yeah, tell the audience what your IG handle is, and our moderator can put it in the chat.
And upload it into the chat. But
okay.
I think it's Mellon_eats, and I just upload pictures of like things that I make. Sometimes I'll upload on the story of things that I'm cooking in the process. I love to cook. I think it's fun. I think it's therapeutic. I haven't updated recently. Work has had me full time, and so my meals aren't as cute. They're tasty, but they're not as picture cute, So I'll get back to that. But I do enjoy
that IG page will have you salivating. Let me just say. I don't even know. When I was looking, I was like, wait a minute, I didn't even know Zyda cooked like that. Hidden talents, right?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So Zyda, let's start off by you sharing what the ethnic background is of yourself and your husband.
So I am Black, African American, both sides of the family. Actually, I've been doing some really interesting research on lineage. And, for those of you who are African American as well, especially those in US, you hit that brick wall at about 1870, 1880. But I've been able to trace back pretty far. My husband is white bread white. He'll go into the details of all of the European places that his lineage hails from. Like he's got a little bit of I think he says Polish and Italian. I'm pretty sure his paternal side has, I think 2 generations back, they're like full-blooded Italians that came over, and he's got a little bit of Irish and all of the stuff, but he burns in the sun and all of the other good stuff that comes with that. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So who wants to throw out the first question? Well, I've already asked the first question. Who wants to throw out the second question?
If I can. Well, first and foremost, hello. It's really nice to meet you. You seem to have like such an amazing spirit. I wanted to tell you that as soon as you got on. So
thank you.
Thank you for being on the show. And I do have a question. I've never been in an interracial relationship. I always had in my mind, I had a few pearls of how we would understand one another. Not that I don't believe it's I don't think it's impossible. I just know that there's certain barriers that there's a difference between understanding completely and emoting with someone. So I guess my question for you is, well, one, do you think that because of the campus that you were on and the people that you happened to be around at the time, kind of was the reason as to why you ended up dating outside of your race?
Mm-hmm.
And then my next question is, when instances like George Floyd or Trayvon Martin happen, how do those conversations go inside of your household?
These are really good questions. First, I want to completely validate what you're saying in your hesitancy to date outside of your race, because the reality is it's true. It is difficult. When you're dating someone who's not, for like you and I, right, who are not Black, they're not going to have that understanding of what it's like to be Black in this country. My husband does not have that inherent understanding. He doesn't have that inherent experience. So I absolutely understand that. One way I like to think about it is, even if I were and have pursued relationships with Black men, they don't have the inherent understanding of what it's like to be a woman in this society. So even though we have the same or similar understandings of what it's like to be Black in this country, there are still variations in our experience because they were men and I was a woman. And so there were things there that we didn't quite understand of each other. Or it could be from socioeconomic different backgrounds, right? If I was dating a Black man who grew up in a very wealthy family, and I grew up personally not in a wealthy family, we have differences on what that experience is. So sometimes even in those areas, it can make it difficult to have conversations. So that's something that I think about. I just do have that extra barrier of my husband doesn't have the inherent experience of what it's like to be white. I will say that I think going to a PWI definitely increased the chances of me dating someone outside of my race. That wasn't my exclusive experience when I was in college. In fact, most of my dating was like not white guys.
I was actually going to ask that,
Yeah, that's totally valid. So I was of the same mindset when I first went to college. Granted, my crushes throughout time were of various racial backgrounds. I had crushes on guys who were of Hispanic backgrounds, mixed background, Black background, whatever. When I first started dating in college, I was exclusively dating Black guys. Like I was seeking out romantic relationships with Black men. It just so happened that the relationships I was trying to seek out, they weren't interested in relationships that were romantic or long-term. They happened to be interested in relationships that were purely physical. And that was not something I was interested in pursuing. Not to say that I left those relationships or those attempted relationships believing that all Black men only want physical relationships. Not at all what my experience was. It just so happened that in those people that I happened to be trying to date weren't interested in dating at the time. And that's totally fine because I could have had that experience with anybody. I think if I had gone to an HBCU, I probably wouldn't be married to the guy I'm married to now, right? I'd probably be married to a Black guy, especially because of the environment that I would be surrounded in, right? So I do believe strongly that PWIs have a huge impact on that experience. And then to your second question about like George Floyd and everything, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, it was very, very difficult. It was difficult because it was such a traumatic time for so many of us. And the person who I was trapped in a house with for the pandemic was actually not even just my husband, but our my brother-in-law was staying with us because he had gotten a job at the same place where my husband works. So I was in during a pandemic, trapped in the house with two white men who just did not understand why I was so angry. And I couldn't quite articulate why I was so angry. And I couldn't process fully outwardly to them why I was angry. I just was doing what I could in that moment.
Wow.
And so there were times where I would literally, they would ask me what's wrong. And I'm like, you don't understand. And that alone frustrated me. And so I would hold myself up in like a room just to kind of process my emotions. I leaned on my friends a lot. And part of the issue too that I had that has grown tremendously since George Floyd and everything is finding a way to articulate what I'm feeling and for me to be okay with the fact that Jake will not fully understand it, but he will understand it the best of his ability. Like no matter how many conversations, how many lessons, how many anti-racist, whatever things that he works on, he's still not a Black person. So there's still going to be this layer of him not fully understanding because he doesn't live it. So I will not say that I'm not going to paint this picture that being in an interracial relationship was like rainbows and flowers all the time, because 2020 was a strain on my relationship. It was a strain on myself. It's a strain on my mental health. And not even just my relationship with him, but my relationship with his family, because I felt like I couldn't trust anybody
Wow.
who looked that way, because even, you're taught that a lot of times, your parents teach you how to be a certain way, but the reality is you spend a lot of your time conditioned by society, conditioned by the schools that you go to, conditioned by the people who exist around you. You spend more time with other people in your formative years than you do with your family. You're at school from 7:30 until maybe 3 o'clock. 5 days a week. That's a large period of time where you're not under your parents or your family's care. So you're being conditioned by those environments. And growing up in the South, you're conditioned to be kind. You're conditioned to be nice. You're conditioned to give people the benefit of the doubt. So not only was 2020 rough because it was racially traumatic, but it was awakening for me because I was realizing that those methods I had been conditioned to use don't work always, right? You can be super kind to white people. You can be, give white people the benefit of the doubt. And then when situations like this come up and they don't have your back the way you thought they were going to because you had been kind, because you had given them the benefit of the doubt, it's very hurtful. And so you grieve, you grieve what you thought were the relationships. You grieve what you thought were spaces where you could be honest about how things were hurting you. And they can't take that. They can't acknowledge that whether it's intentional or not, that the things they have done have hurt you, because they're too wrapped up in not being able to hold themselves accountable, that they're capable of causing pain, even if they're not trying to be painful people. That is rough. That's rough to experience. And so for me, I spent a lot of 2020 feeling betrayed by my conditioning, by society, betrayed by what I thought I had earned up good deeds and care from people by telling them, hey, what you said is racially offensive. And I'm telling you this because I believe that you care about our relationship and you care about potentially hurting me, whether it be intentional or not. And not getting the feedback that I expected, not getting the, okay, I absolutely understand and I want to make things better. So I had to work through that pain. And the reality is Jake couldn't help me work through that pain. And I was expecting that because he's my partner, he should be able to help me work through that pain. But there's only a limit to what he could do. So when I started to learn and accept what Jake is capable of doing and what he's not capable of doing, and stop trying to put him into places where he can't be, that's where our relationship really developed a really good balance.
Girl, I can let you keep talking. You and that is so informative. That look that you just allowed us to experience through your eyes and through what was happening almost brought tears to my eyes, because the magnitude of the pandemic isolating you in a situation during a time that was so paramount for Black people today, and trying to get your partner, even though, and I'm not saying he didn't understand, like you said, to the level that he could, but get him to understand that level, but in such a personal way, knowing that it will be difficult, because in order to be able to experience what you're going through, you have to live through what we've gone through. And that was so informative for me, because I was like, wow, you had to actually, in my words, live on eggshells during this time, because you wanted to express your feelings. You didn't want to isolate him and make him think that he couldn't understand you. You tried to bring him into that understanding, but at the same time, you had to acknowledge he will never be able to experience the whole scope of what I'm bringing to him, because in order to do that, you had to grow up in a Black society. You had to realize that even though I'm in your world, my world made me have to always live expecting to be judged, prejudged, and not expecting what you would expect, to walk in a room and know that people will look at me not because I'm even a female at times, but because I'm Black, because I used to tell tell people when they said, well, you can't say people are racist. And I said, okay, if I bought you a picture of people, all of these people, say that it was cops, just a picture of cops, and they were of different ethnicities. My opinion is that you would look at the white cop and say, he's a cop. But you'd say, oh, that's a Black man, he's a cop. Oh, that's this man, and he's a cop. So you wouldn't put us in the same category at the same level. You would see a white guy and say, that's a cop, that's a cop, that's a cop, oh, that's a Black man. Oh, but he's a cop. That's where your mentality will go, because you ain't looking at the uniform, you're looking at the faces. And what you were explaining, it was just listen, I'm asking God to help you all, and let me tell you seriously,
it's true.
Let me tell you why. I was asked years ago when I was working for a utility company. I was working in a house. And I don't know if I shared this with the team, but it was two Black women. The woman was a Black woman, and I guess it was her friend, her sister, whoever. And she was in there. They were in there fussing about her ex, and that he's with a white girl. He married a white girl. It's never going to work. And I mean, they were just dogging this relationship left and right. And then she just happened to turn around. She said, well, what do you think? Now, I'm here to fix your phone lines and work on your phone cable. You just going to ask me. And she turned around. She said, well, what do you think? You hear what we're talking about? I said, yeah, I hear y'all. She said, well, what do you think? I said, you don't want to know my answer. And she looked at me. She said, no, seriously, I want to know it. I said, you're the reason it's going to work. I said, you have so much animosity, anger, and hate for what he's the person he's with, that they're going to have to work harder to make it work. I said, and because of you, it'll be a successful relationship. I said, you need to come on down and get a life. You need to find your own man, go about your own business, and start to live your own life. I said, but the hatred and the anger that you have, and I said, and no doubt the stuff you're spewing to your kids, I said, you're going to be the success of that relationship, because you can't get past your hurt and your anger and your frustration. I said, if you ever get past that, maybe y'all can come together and have a barbecue one day way in the future. I said, but thanks to you, they're going to live long and strong.
but it's hard, oftentimes underneath anger, there's a lot of hurt, right? And
Pain.
aside that was like, that made me feel so sad to like even hear you speak to like you trying to earn respect and all of that. You said by being kind, like you shouldn't have to work for someone to treat you like a human being, right? But it seems like, that's the experience often of people of color. In order to like gain respect, you have to like do all this heavy work all the time and always be on in a way that other people, especially white people, don't have to, and have that behavior be associated with like their ethnicity in any way. But it also like sounds that was really painful to like take these vulnerable steps, right? Because to admit to someone, right, your behavior is hurtful, it's not easy.
It's not.
It's not, right?
It takes a lot of courage because you're told, again, another conditioning is you don't mention those types of things because we've all been conditioned to believe that we're not capable of hurting people, that we don't hurt people, right? That we treat people the way they want to be treated. We treat people the way we would want to be treated. So there's no way that we would be mean or we would be harmful with our words or with our actions. So yeah, like that was a huge part of it. And like you're saying, I mean, just to highlight this idea that like tone policing, all these types of things that are symptoms of you need to earn the respect, you need to earn, all of these things, it's inherently dehumanizing, right? Because other people don't have to walk through the world being that way, right? Depending on what you look like. If you're a man, you don't have to be nice to get the things that you want, because a lot of times men get the things that they want without having to be nice, and often aren't nice at all, right? Or there isn't this long history of white people needing to be kind in order to earn the things that they need or desire or want. That's not a historically inherent aspect of their experience, but it is an inherent aspect of our experience.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like we have to earn it, but you're entitled to it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's where the separation is. Your entitlement makes me have to work for it. Not even to be on your level, just to be seen as human, just to be seen as somebody who has a right to anything. Because we've heard it before where they said, well, you don't even belong here, you need to go. And it's like, listen, I mean, do you realize that you don't belong here either? And it's just like, if everybody go home, this is going to be one empty continent. America will be empty and have the indigenous people and the animals. That's it. Because every single one of us are immigrants. And to be seen as an immigrant from an immigrant, that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Have an immigrant see you as an immigrant.
Right. And in many cases, Rosie, I wonder if sometimes like, okay, maybe for some people, their parents came like a generation ago, whereas like some African Americans have been here from the beginning, right?
We've been longer.
Yeah.
Say the first people that came to America, you need to have that conversation too, but that's another topic.
Sharon, you got that? That's one of the titles, first people that came to America. Egypt wants to handle
right, because I would love to divest in that. But
we need to.
Now that we are getting to this topic of like this type of conversation, I'm curious to you again, Zyda, like when you two were meeting each other's families, and or even just telling your family, hey, I have a white boyfriend, I have a black girlfriend. What was that experience like? And did you feel like it was received well, or was one side more receptive and one side was a little bit more hesitant?
So I will say that, especially on my mother's side, interracial relationships, specifically black and white relationships, are nothing new. Two of my aunts are married to white men, and I have an uncle who is married to a Japanese woman. And my grandfather, before he passed away, after he divorced my grandmother years down the line, he married a Filipino woman. So my family and interracial relationships is not a new concept. In fact, when I told my mom that I was dating someone, I didn't even introduce him as white. I just said, I'm like dating this guy, and she met him at one of my recitals. And when I was away for spring break or something, visiting my family on the West Coast, they were like, well, what does he look like? Show us a picture. So I just pulled up, like a picture of him and like, oh, he looks cute. So it wasn't like oh, he's white, like it wasn't that kind of thing. I do know that, and this is purely based on, this initial part is purely based on what I've heard. I was not first person in this experience, but I do know that when my husband told his parents that he was dating someone and he told them my name, they asked, well, what is she? Right? Because Zyda is not a general name. It has an ethnic kind of something to it. So their initial question was like, well, what is she? And I will say that my experience meeting them was no different than me meeting other white people for the first time, if that makes sense. Like, you guys know what it's like to meet.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, and I'll be more specific. Meeting nice white people for the first time, it's the same. It wasn't like I didn't feel like they were overtly racist, if that makes sense. But it was something that I was used to because I've met a lot of nice white people before, and you know what to do, like you know how to behave, you know how to talk. Yes. You don't, you code switch, you know, like you know how to navigate those spaces. We are pros at navigating those spaces. So for me, meeting his family, I was nervous, don't get me wrong. I was nervous because I was meeting his family for the first time. I was nervous because I was in another state meeting his family. Like, it wasn't like meeting them, I was staying at their house for like after the holidays. So, that was a nerve-wracking thing. But I will honestly say that throughout most of the relationship, I was never quite comfortable because I was the only person of color in the room. And while I know what that's like, we know what that's like to be the only person of color, the only Black person in the space. Still knowing what that feels like, that feeling is never 100% being at ease, never 100% being comfortable, never 100% being yourself, because being myself would be using AAVE whenever I want to. That's not how I'm going to navigate space with them, because that just doesn't feel comfortable for me. Not wearing my bonnet down for breakfast after, taking that off, like these are things that that's so
come on with it.
You know what I mean? Like,
real, Zyda. You're so real.
I'm just saying, listen, in this neighborhood that we live in now, I will go for walks in my bonnet because I just do not care. But when you're 20, meeting people for the first time who's like the parents and family of your boyfriend, you're not going to walk around the house in your bonnet because you don't know what assumptions they're going to make about that appearance. And so you're just trying to avoid unnecessary experiences. Like the food was another big thing, like, like there's no hot sauce in the house. Yeah, like,
hot sauce is a salad dressing for us.
It is. It's very important. And like, I've got like 4 different hot sauces in here, and there are none there. Like,
bring your own
certain spices, and they're just not there. I'm looking for a special flavor, and I'm just not getting it. But how do you navigate eating food that you're not very a big fan of? Or,
listen, it's kind of dangerous to tell people you put slap your mama on your food, and they think you want to slap your mama on your food. Exactly. No, that's a seasoning.
Yes.
I'm not going to slap my mama.
Exactly. So it was fine. It wasn't something I wasn't used to, but because my husband was like my longest relationship, there were aspects of the length of that relationship that I was being exposed to that I didn't experience in my past relationships. Right. So, going to family things, and again, being the only person of color in the room and feeling alone. And that impacts, again, going back to like being able to talk about things or not talk about things. When you're the only soldier of your army in the space, you're not going to start a battle because you're alone, right? Like if something was said, and things were said, I'm not saying like overtly racist things were said, but microaggressions were committed. But if I were to take the time in that moment and say, hey, that made me feel yucky inside. I'm battling 6 or 7 or maybe even 10 people who are going to react the way most people react, which is
angry with the woman too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you learn to, and it's not even just in relationships, but it's, and I think people are doing it less now, right? Especially after George Floyd, but most people that have a similar Black experience to my own know what it's like to just kind of be like, that was a microaggression, but I'm going to talk about it later to someone who is Black, right? Or I'm going to shove it down. And so there were a lot of things that I shoved down because I was the only soldier of my army in the space. I would have been going up against 10 people who all would have had the same united defensive reaction, defending whatever person said the thing, because how dare you accuse us of saying something hurtful or harmful?
And you know, that's so crazy because our last show, we talked about that, how we learn how to change our lingo. How I say bilingual, and I'm not talking about speaking Spanish or I'm talking about speaking different types of American, you know, and I had to explain to them how on my job, they were teaching us how to greet customers. And I said, that don't work in my world. I'm not going to walk up in Camden. Say, hello, my name is Rosie. I'm with the phone. I'm this and everything. And now they're going to look at me and say, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You got to, and that's what you're talking about. You have to actually learn how to speak so many different Americans here in America, because if we talk, and I hate when people say ghetto, because ghetto is wherever you come from. Your ghetto might be not look like my ghetto, but you got a ghetto too, you know. But if I come and speak the way I speak from Camden, I can't go and speak like that in Cherry Hill and stuff, because they're going to think I'm uneducated. They're going to think I'm dumb, and I might be 10 times smarter than them, but I just don't speak like you. So we had to learn how to navigate in different areas. I can't go down in Camden where the Spanish speaking people are and speak my English. I got to, do some Spanish over there, because they're going to be looking at me, ¿Qué dice? And I gotta shift back to my father's language, So you're hitting all of them marks, but I don't want to sound crazy, but it made me feel frightened for you when you were talking about it, because you're in with his family and stuff, and then you have to navigate what battles do I take here, because I don't want to be seen as the woman who separated their son or their brother from them because she's just angry, like Egypt says, she's angry and she's putting her aggression on all of us because of what somebody else did. No, I'm just trying to express how I feel, and you all aren't sensitive enough to try and navigate this with me. You just want to say, well, it's not our fault, and you take it personal. It's not personal. It's just I'm in pain and you all don't understand, and instead of trying to hear me out, then I may instead offend you and make you feel like I'm attacking you all for what I'm mad at what's going on over there. And I'm not, girl.
I know I know I'm expressing these things to you all, but I do want to say that even throughout all of this, right, I still made the active decision to be in a relationship with my husband.
Absolutely.
I still made the active decision that when the next family visit came up, I still wanted to go, right? So it wasn't an entirely negative experience. So I do want to make that like so profoundly clear. Like I would not be married to him, still going on however long I'm married to him, if there weren't so many good things about my relationship. And I also view family a little bit different. Like for me, like Jake and I are a family, right? Like we are our own family. When we married, I married him. I did not marry his family necessarily. And he didn't marry my family necessarily. I know like a good example, right, is like Indian culture, South Asian culture. For those marriages, you are bringing those two families together. Like it's not even just like bride and groom. It's both sides need to
family. Yeah.
That's like a whole nother level of like how they view marriage and how they view the joining of relationships. For me, they are a separate entity and my family is a separate entity. And that's also like how he functions with my family. You know, like it's not like you take all of us or none of us at all. There were situations with my father where he said things that made my husband uncomfortable. And I stood up for my husband because I felt like my husband was right and my husband was my family, right? Even though my father is my father, I don't think he was right just because he was my dad, because I believe that he was in the wrong. And Jake did the same thing for me in several instances. But like even in those situations of like things with his family, it was, they were things that bothered me, but you're so used to experiencing these types of microaggressions that you kind of move on. You know, like they're like a little paper cut in the moment, but then like it heals up in a day. Like the things that they were saying were not things I hadn't heard before. So it wasn't even like like I'm hurt, but it's like a roll your eyes kind of microaggression. Does that make sense? Like,
yes, it does.
It's like, you know, an example would be, like I was putting salt on something and I was told, I don't want to get like too personal, like who the people are, but one of the members of their family was like, oh, you know, you need to watch your salt intake because, you know, Black people are more susceptible to blah, blah, blah. But there are systemically racist reasons why Black people are more susceptible to high blood pressure and diabetes and cholesterol. It's not just because I'm Black. And what's ironic is that like there is no one in my family with those issues, but there's a lot of people in his family with those issues. So
how did you respond?
So then you just told them. So what did you tell them? So I see a lot of you all are Black.
No, but you know what? That's something that I bring up.
Bro,
that is something that
I'm messing. It's a joke. It's a joke.
No. So in that moment,
so they gotta be Black.
So in that moment, I think what I did is, I'm trying to remember how I responded. I think, you know, well, I pretty much detailed that like I have never had an instance where I've gone to a doctor and I've been told I have high blood pressure, and I have always been the kind of person who will put salt on things, so I'm fine. And, you know, the rebuttal was, you know, oh, well, I have patients who are, you know, skinny Black people and they still have whatever. And I was like, well, you know what? I'll cross that bridge if and when I get there. Now, was it something that was constantly eating at the back of my head? Absolutely. I became way more paranoid about every visit that I would get where they would test, you know, they would take my blood or they would take my blood pressure. I would constantly ask these things. And I was finally told by a Black nurse, she was like, you keep asking this question and you've never had these types of issues before. Like, what's going on? I was like, well, and I explained to her, this is what I was told by a family member. And she was like, she detailed to me, like, no, the reasons are systemically racist. The reasons people say this is because they're taught in school that Black people only eat fried chicken and greens and all of these soul food oriented things. And that's not necessarily the case. Also, even though there are people who eat that and are absolutely fine, the larger issue is the fact that a lot of Black people in lower income areas live in food deserts where all they have access to is fast food and convenience stores. They don't have access to grocery stores that are in a walking distance or within good public transportation. So these reasons are not just,
genetic
Black makes me, but there's systemic reasons why. And so I later went to this person and tried to explain that, and it was this whole big thing. Again, I wasn't trying to be, you know, racist. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to explain to you why this phrasing of which you presented this potential problem for myself was harmful, and how it harbored paranoia in myself, which stress causes health issues. You know, so there are physical manifestations of me internalizing what you told me. And I'm trying to help you because if you are dealing with Black patients, if this is how I felt, imagine how they feel.
Yeah.
How long it took for me to find out the truth behind that statistic.
Mm-hmm.
What if they never find out the truth behind that statistic? So I'm not saying this to like make you flog yourself. I'm telling you this because I believe that you're someone who should care about the impact of those words and care about learning new information so you could be better equipped to deal with people like that. And it took me explaining it to my husband, who then explained it to that person, which is another example of a microaggression because he told them the same thing I was telling them. But because it came from his mouth, it was easier to digest than it was from my own. And these are things, granted, these are examples that have happened in the past. Things have been worked through, right? Conversations have been had. But these are examples of like bigger microaggressions rather than the smaller things that are just like, oh, really? Like, okay, you are a product of that colorblind raising where it's like, I don't see color. You could be purple, pink, red, green, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, that's convenient if like your life experience isn't impacted by the color of your skin. You have the privilege of being able to go through the world being like, race doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter when race for you doesn't matter. You know?
Yeah.
It doesn't. And so things like that were like more festering situations. And again, these were situations that were happening during 2020. So on top of the pandemic, on top of the racial trauma, on top of my heightened level of irritation with like everything that's going on and just being like angry, just angry, you know what I mean? Like righteously angry all the time.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, this was just like another thing on top of it. And so, you know, I'm grateful to have had these conversations. I don't think that there's a single, and I will honestly say that even in my relationship, like my partner isn't the most, you know, he's not going to have pictures of Fred Hampton on his, like, in his office. Like, you know, I also think that's a little inauthentic. Like when a white person does that feels a little bit weird to me. I don't desire that in my partner, but even for the white people who are like that, you're still going to have moments like this because you're dealing with their family who's potentially older generations who grew up of a certain mindset. And there's even people in my family who are not white, who are of a different generation from my own, who have certain perspectives and views on situations. People call me the Malcolm X on my side of the family. People call me Little Malcolm X because I'm just like so politically oriented, you know. I love talking about these things. People think I'm angry all the time, but I'm not. Like, I enjoy talking about politics. I enjoy learning about the ways in which certain situations, certain policies, certain laws impact certain demographics, and not even just racial demographics, but like sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, all these things. I want to learn these things. I want to learn how to be a better human being to those who are around me. I want to make sure that I'm showing up for the people with different intersectional identities than me, the way I would want people to show up for me who have different intersectional identities. Like the way I want white people or the way I want men to show up for me in conversations is the way I want to show up for other people. Exactly. So learning things is like not a big deal. People telling me, hey, what you said is hurtful or harmful. Yeah, I get butthurt because I don't want to be someone who hurts someone, but that's for me. I can't put that on someone else. If they're telling me that something I've said or done is hurtful, I can't vomit all of that. Oh, I didn't mean it, blah, 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 because that doesn't help them. If I accidentally shoot someone and I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to, that doesn't change the pain. They're still in pain. Like, so what are you going to do about it to help? Like, rush them to a hospital, put pressure on the wound. Those are things that are helpful to harm, whether it be intentional or not. But just like trying to like avoid accountability is not going to help the situation.
This is great, right? And I just have so many questions that I know we don't have time for. So I'm going to pose two questions.
We'll have to do a part 2 with Zyda.
Zyda, get ready. Get ready.
I do kind of fall into a different thought process. Obviously, as I mentioned to you before, I've never been in an interracial relationship, and it is very much so indicative to my thought process. And not that I don't see white women and I think, oh, she's attractive, but there's a slew of things that I could go into as to, for me personally, why I have never went at least to that direction. I think I've always dated Black women, and if she wasn't Black, she might have been like Black and Hispanic. But anyway, so there's a more lighthearted question. And then
also 2 worlds. Huh?
I don't mind serious questions.
No. I'm not running away from the serious questions. I'm saying it's
Okay.
because jokingly in my mind, when you were talking about the food and not being as I was like, I was going to ask that because I was like, we always had that joke in the Black community, like, is the potato salad? I don't know.
No.
So, but it was more
some of the dishes that I have witnessed in my
casserole.
experience.
I'm playing.
Oh.
Right.
Tell them to go to your Instagram account.
Yes, right. That's true, right. But I wanted to ask you, I'm big. I play the sax. I love music a lot. And I was curious about, like, since you're into music and you play the piano, is there a huge difference in the music that you guys enjoy? And are you able to, but I know sometimes as musicians, you love music in general, so you can enjoy anything, but I'm sure that there's probably some differences in that. That was the one thing. And also, like, you being a Black woman in an interracial relationship, I feel like has a different connotation than being a Black man or seeing Black men that are in interracial relationships. So I want to know I guess this is a panel question. That part is, why is there such a different dynamic when it comes to Black men dating white women versus Black women dating white men?
Okay, so let me quickly, I would love to address the second question too, and then definitely leave the floor for other people. In terms of music, actually, we listen to a lot of similar music.
That's dope.
But I will say that my taste in music, I'm the kind of person who likes a little bit of everything. I listen to jazz, I listen to classical music, musical theater, hip hop, rap, R&B, soul, but then the alternatives of each of those genres, right? Like, I'm not just someone who's going to listen to like Future and DaBaby. I'm also going to listen to like Aaron May and like, all of these alternative kind of like not as mainstream artists. I'm someone who likes Erykah Badu and Ari Lennox, but I also listen to Curtis Mayfield and Radiohead, and it really just kind of depends. When I first met my husband, he listened to a lot of Linkin Park, like 2000s Linkin Park, Future, Drake, like those, like he very much if you think about like suburban white guy and what a lot of suburban white guys listen to, it was very much that. Like, it was very much that. But now he listens to a lot of like jazz influenced R&B or hip hop. He listens to a lot of like Tom Misch and Aaron May, but we also love like Kendrick Lamar, and there's actually some artists that he has introduced me to that I really, really loved. So there's a lot of overlap in the music that we listen to, but then he still kind of listens to like System of a Down and Rage Against the Machine and, the Eagles, and those types of things. Yeah. And what else? So
your musical background professionally, are you an opera singer? Classical?
Yeah. So that was my, that's what I got my degrees in.
Oh.
So I did classical voice in my undergrad and then opera performance as my master's degree. And I did study classical music when I was in high school. I went to a fine arts high school in Alabama. But believe it or not, I am not the kind of person who is going to be playing like Puccini and Mozart and all those things around the house. I'm the type of opera singer who will enjoy those things, but I primarily listen to other music because I really feel like a lot of that type of music is best enjoyed live. You can listen to some of the greats recordings. You can listen to some of the newest artists. But to me, there's nothing that will beat a live performance where mistakes are made. You're getting the acoustics in the moment. So if you look at my Spotify top artists, it's not going to be anything classical. That's just, I'm an outlier in the opera community. There's a lot of opera singers who would just like not like me because I'm that way, but I do not care. And then to the other question, the difference. I think, and I'm going to speak from my generational perspective, right? As a millennial, the conversations that millennials have in regards to a Black woman with a white man versus a white woman with a Black man. in our experience, a lot of times the stigma around, I'll speak about it from two perspectives. One is the type of relationship without children, and then one with children. When it comes to the relationship without children, sometimes a Black man pursuing a relationship with a white woman is not because they just genuinely like the person, but there's a lot of anti-Blackness that is like riddled within them, that their reasons for seeking out a white woman is because they're seeking out all of these things that they feel like are not possibly found in a Black woman, right? That there is something better to be found in a white woman than there is in a Black woman, right? That a lot, if you look at the podcasts or Black men who will talk about why they are dating a white woman, instead of focusing on why they're dating that white woman, they'll focus on all the things they don't like about a Black woman. So the perspective of that relationship can be very anti-Black. Not saying that they're all that way, but they can be very anti-Black. Now, there are some Black women, white man relationships that are like that. Candace Owens is a prime example of one who looks at who I believe her pursuit in a relationship with a white man was very anti-Black in its origin. Mm-hmm. Black women and white men, oftentimes, Black women have either attempted to pursue relationships with Black men and encounter Black men who are anti-Black, or because if you look at it statistically, Black women are like not the ones who are married as much, or all of these other things. There's not as many of us. Like if you look at the ratio of how many Black men exist and how many Black women exist, there's literally not an even number. It's not balanced out. And that's to say if everyone was straight. That's not even the reality. Not everyone is. That sometimes we find our white male relationships just by chance of just trying out dating them. Sometimes it's for some Black women it is, I am trying to date someone of a certain demographic and I haven't found the right fit, so let me expand where I'm searching. But then for some people, yeah, it might be this is specifically what I want, or this is the area that I'm predominantly in, right? So for my circumstances, I went to a PWI, so I was mostly surrounded with white men versus Black men, and it just so happened that the Black men that I was dating weren't interested in dating me in a long-term capacity. So I chose to broaden my horizons. I chose to take a step outside of what my original vision was, right? Because I didn't want to box myself off to just one type of person. I wanted to consider the possibility that maybe I wasn't looking in all the places that my potential life partner existed. And maybe one of those places my potential life partner existed was outside of Black men. Now, from the family perspective, when you are raising a family, in many instances, the nurturer is the woman, right? And I'm talking about like male-female relationships. If you are a child who is Black presenting being nurtured by a white mother, that white mother does not have the capacity to fully nurture you in the way you are going to exist and be interacted with in the world, right? Which is why a lot of times you'll have mixed kids who will come out of those types of relationships really struggling with what their identity is because they were not nurtured by someone who lives that experience.
I think of it that way. So I think that's,
you know what I mean?
I'm sorry, Rosie.
No, I'm just saying, like, if you think about that, right? Like for my husband and I, if our children are Black presenting, or not even just Black presenting, that's the thing about mixed kids in this type of society. If they don't look white, they're going to be treated differently. Like that's just a reality. Even if they can't quite figure out what they are, they're going to be treated differently because people cannot quickly identify them as white. But I am someone who has walked through the world having the experience of being treated differently because I'm easily identifiable as not white. So I will be able to nurture my children and give them the tools, maybe even the tools I have and the tools I didn't have growing up, to navigate those types of interactions, to be the best equipped to stand up for themselves and be confident in who they are in a world and in a society that may not want them to be confident in who they are. So my children may not have as much of a confusing complex on who they are because I am the nurturer. I am the non-white nurturer.
That is tough for me. And I say that's tough for me, not because I desire to date a white woman, but just from a male to a woman's perspective. I think that, you know, with the connotation that women or black women have about black men dating white women, that is just a stereotypical thought process as to why it is. And a lot of one of the reasons that you have mentioned prior to, and again, this is not my reality, but at the same time, I do have friends that do date white women, but it's not because they only want to date white women or anything like that. But it's also like I know people that have had experiences where they dated black women and their experience wasn't what they thought it would be. So then they ended up very similar, dating a white woman, and they ended up feeling like they were appreciated in a way that they might not have been, or respected in a way they might not have been prior to. So, but then there's there's levels to it, right? Because then there's other black men that might have had that experience, and now they bash black women in order to make themselves feel okay with what they're doing. I'm not saying that should be the dynamic, but I do think that oftentimes we put men at a certain level and act like they can't do it for the same reason as the woman is doing. And I think that there are a lot of black men, even though stereotypically it was, once they get on, they leave you for a white. Like, that's not what it is. I think now people are just generally chasing love now. And sometimes they're not getting it in their own community, so they find it outside of it. And to suggest, not you in particular.
No, you are 100% valid in what you're articulating.
So to suggest that black men are doing it because of that reason or whatever the case may be, and is viewed a certain way, I think that it has to, if it's going to be said, it needs to be said to black women and to black men, not just to black men, because I do think that there are a lot of black men that are dating white women, in particularly because they might have watched anime, and anime wasn't seen. That was like a clown. Oh, you play video games, you watching anime?
Yeah.
But in reality, that's what they liked. And then they found somebody that was appreciative of the fact they liked anime. So I think that we got to be fair. But I do understand the nurturing part. I never thought about that aspect. But then as a black man, I would also say, I'm a black man, and if I have a biracial son, I'm going to be able to give him tougher skin than his mom can. So there's a different dynamic that I can say the same thing that works on the same level. However, I never thought about the nurturing aspect that is very much so needed to be able to survive in the world. But yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely pose that question.
Yeah.
But see, this is why perspective is important, right? Because I'm coming at it from a woman's perspective, right? In the circles that I exist in. And I think you're absolutely right that there is a prominence in the idea that black men who date white women, more of them are inherently anti-black in that choice than black women are in that choice. I think that's absolutely true. That's absolutely what the narrative is, especially in millennial circles and maybe even in Gen Z circles or maybe even beyond that. I can't speak to other generations because I don't exist in those generations. I do feel like whether that's the choice that you're making, it exists in a place of pain. I firmly believe that if there are black men or black women whose choice to date white people is because they feel like they're only going to be able to get a certain amount of love or support from a white person and they're never going to get it from a black person, it exists from the pain of some past relationship or interaction. Sure. And so if I think about it being from that pain, I'm able to be a little bit more open-minded on this person needs healing, right? Not to say that there isn't harm in sharing those types of narratives and being the kind of person, right, that makes a whole podcast or makes a whole YouTube channel or builds their whole platform on bashing someone that they're exclusively deciding no longer to date. There's still harm in that, but they're causing harm centered from their own pain, from harm that they experienced.
Bingo.
If we can't center that in our minds, then there's no way for us to move past that. Like, we all dream of existing in this like post-racial society, but until we heal from our pain, we're never going to be able to, my mom dreams of me raising my children in a post-racial way, and I would love to be able to do that. But the reality is, in my lifetime, we're not going to exist in a post-racial society. Yeah. My children may live to see a lifetime where that is the case, but I can't raise my children in a post-racial society when we don't exist in one. I can raise my children to be aware of how to navigate the situation and look forward to a post-racial society and find ways to center how is this person potentially harmed, how is this person potentially experiencing pain, so we can learn to extend grace and be self-aware. But I can't equip them for a war or a world that doesn't exist yet. Right. You know, we're just not there yet. Like, too many of us are in pain, and not enough of us are willing to accept that everyone is in pain, and that so many of us are navigating through the pain rather than or too many of us are navigating with the pain being our motive, like running on that pain rather than like working through it and working from a healing mindset, which is very difficult.
Right.
Difficult. Like, I'm still working through it. I'm not going to say that I'm a perfect person. There's pain that I'm working through, but
and to raise children in a society that still puts race at the forefront is wrong anyway. To not make sure that they understand the parameters that they have to live in, being a child of color, you're not doing them any service,
right?
Because the bottom line is, they're going to be out there one day by themselves and have to address situations that come about. And if you don't properly prepare them, it's going to be a bad situation. So, but that was very, very enlightening, that nurturing factor of it.
Because that's exactly what you just said. I mean, to raise them in this like post-racial idea is a lot of times what colorblind nurturing is, which is how white people function. And you can't raise someone whose color is going to impact their interactions with people as if that's not a thing. Because you're not preparing them.
And when you hear them saying, well, I want them to grow up in a world where race doesn't matter. Well, guess what? That's a race that's not going to be run well. Right. Because you are not
that's a myth.
Properly teaching them that somebody is going to look at them and say, you don't belong here. Yeah. That's wrong. You can't do that. So we have to teach calisthenics to our kids. We have to teach them to be able to jump and run and flip and do all of that stuff, because society is going to throw everything at our kids. Yeah. And if you don't teach them how to jump, duck, weave, and do all of that stuff, it's going to be a bad situation. Then you're going to be mad at somebody else because you didn't really teach them how to duck and weave. But then you're going to be mad at the person throwing the punches.
One of the things I wanted to mention to follow up with what Egypt's question was and comment, and I'm going to say I'm the last year of the, oh wow, what's the generation? I don't know.
That's
no.
Latchkey, you're not latchkey?
No, what's the one?
You're talking
boomers. I'm at the last year of the baby boomers.
Nah, really?
64. I think that's what happened last time, right? Egypt, I said the same thing. But anyway, right?
Yeah, boom, baby.
So that generation, and maybe before, and even maybe one after, and you guys can speak to it if you can, regarding Black men and white women and Black women and white men. It was said for some, of course not all, that Black men dated white women because of the status. Right. And it's what raised their status. And so then I'm thinking, if that's the case for Black men, white men wouldn't date Black women because it would lower their status. Right. So, but I mean, I always heard it for the
but
Black
then
women.
My question would be, would Black women status be raised by dating a white man? Like, you see how like the spectrum is it all depends on how you look at it. And I just want to say, like,
right, but really, what I was particularly saying, so if the man is typically going after the woman, right, and so if he might be interested in the Black woman because the Black woman is exotic, that whole thing, right, but if I take her on as my woman. I might have these secret desires, but I can't take her on as my woman because then it'll lower my status.
Got you.
Which sort of brings me to the question I wanted to ask Zyda with that. Are there things that, and I think your answer with the music explains it, right? That things that brought you together that maybe didn't have to do with race in some situations, and more so with like common interests. And then are there ways in which it feels like you're more alike, couples that are not interracial than not, like, yes, you have this culture difference along with like skin color, and you have to navigate unique challenges, absolutely, not to minimize them when you talked about all of these things that you are facing. But are there ways in which like you are a couple, like any other couple?
Oh yeah. So I mean, some things that like we bond over. We don't necessarily play the same video games, all of the same video games. Like, I'm not into sports video games. You can't get me to play Madden. You can't get me to play 2K. I'll sit here and watch him play, but like, I'm not into that. But like, we both love like those like strategy type of like Skyrim and Diablo 3 and those types of things. We bond over that. We both love food. We're the kind of person, if you see us in a restaurant, we're not having a long conversation. We're just eating. Like, we're not the kind of person who goes in a restaurant and like, wait, the food is practically cold by the time we like get to the last nibbles. No, we're scarfing it down in like 10 and 15 minutes. And then we're the food is so we get home. Like, I'm not wasting this food and letting it get cold. We both love to hike. We hike and backpack, like camp out in the middle of the woods. Like, we're talking like tent, dehydrated food, all of that on our backs. We love the beach.
Were you doing that before y'all met?
Yeah, I was.
I didn't know if that was something you did wrong and you liked it, so now you do it.
I hiked before and I had camped before. I had never backpacked before, and he had never backpacked before. So that was an entirely new experience that both of us had shared for the first time.
Right.
And I was definitely one of those, like, I texted all my friends, letting them know where I was. And then I was like, this is when I expect to be back. Yeah, listen, okay? So those are definitely things that we enjoy doing that like have nothing to do with our race, so to speak. But at the same time, there are ways in which that informs what we do. Mm-hmm. Like, when we drive to most of the camping spaces, at least in the South, you have to drive through pretty like rural areas. So he knows that he does the driving. I don't drive. Mm-hmm. He drives because he's going to be the white man in the driver's seat. I'm going to be the black person in the passenger. I'm not going to drive through those areas. And he takes that on. I didn't have to ask him to do that because he's aware of those types of things. His taste in food has gotten significantly better since he has been with me.
Yeah, girl.
A person who would just eat like white rice and chicken breast. And now, he's had Ethiopian food. He's had Nigerian, Korean food before, vegan food, and we'll go to his family's house and his mom will be cooking and he'll be like, what are you going to put on that? Like, he packs seasonings.
He looking for that gravy. He looking for that gravy to put on top of that. Country gravy.
So listen, we've molded, we've done some shaping and some nurturing.
But that's what relationship is, getting to know each other and bringing, because God said leave and cleave.
Yeah.
He didn't say leave and take your whole generation. Matter of fact, when he told Abraham get out, he said leave the family behind, and he brought Lot, and Lot got him in a whole bunch of trouble. Yeah. So sometimes, when you leave and cleave, you're supposed to just bring the best of two worlds together and then experiment and make the best of it. And that's what you're doing. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, but and we love documentaries too. Like, we can't get enough of documentaries. We're the kind of person, like, right now we're watching Alone. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. I guess it's technically not a documentary, but it's like about 8 or 10 contestants who get dropped off at random locations in the middle of like a place, and they're only have like their packs, and they bring like 10 things, I think, and they have to survive. Like, if someone survives 100 days, they win, like, I think it's like $100,000 or something like that, or $200,000. And we're so fascinated by those types of things. Yeah. He's big into we're both Capricorns. I don't know if y'all are into astrology. I'm not huge into astrology, but I have noticed that we are both stubborn. There's a lot of ways in which we're alike. there are ways that we handle certain situations that over my growth and becoming more self-aware and working and like therapy and stuff like that, I've realized that there's a lot of ways that we handle situations very similarly, even if I didn't want to admit it before. And so having that awareness has made me like, okay, how am I going to respond to this? You know, like, okay, he's doing this because this is what I would do. Like he's reacting the way I would react. Mm-hmm. So those types of things are super helpful. But there's plenty of difference in us. Like I'm the kind of person who is very outwardly emotional. He is not. And I can't expect him to be that way because that's just not how he is. But the way that he expresses outward emotion to me is not the way you would see him express outward emotion with his family. Like I have the privilege of experiencing a way more intimate expression of emotion and care and physical love language and all these other things that they don't get to witness because I feel like they haven't really gotten to know the parts of him that I've gotten to know, because I'm the kind of person who likes to like, tell me how you feel. Tell me how you feel.
You did.
I did.
Oh, did, girl.
I asked the tough questions and the hard questions because I think that's how you get to know a person. And I just can't live on just superficial conversation. You know, I as much as him and I have argued over the past, the arguments are good because we learn so much about each other. If we hadn't argued, I wouldn't know him. He wouldn't know me. You know, so there's so many things that we have in common that like are not directly related to like race whatsoever.
I know that we have to wrap soon, or probably now, but I want to say from me to you, I commend you for coming on the show and speaking.
Yes.
You're saying I appreciate the perspective that you have provided, and I'm wishing you the best of luck. And I'm really proud of you for the way that you have handled yourself in the situations that you have been in, but also I appreciate that you have a partner that is not Black, that is willing to try to empathize with some of the things and the ways in which you feel. So best of luck to you too.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys for having me on. And if there's any questions that you guys were either like scared to ask or questions you think about later, like,
girl, we just listen, you got to come back for the second show.
Okay.
I got a lot of questions. I don't think I'm scared.
Not over. It is not over.
Please don't hesitate to email me. Don't hesitate to message me. Like, I'm all about like I will share what I'm willing to share because I think it's important. I don't think enough people like get into. I feel like a lot of times interracial relationships, like so many people make it about like, oh, mixed kids, but like that's no, no, like that is a product of it. But like if that's the whole reason why you're going into your interracial relationship, you have a lot of stuff to unpack. I knew marrying the person that I'm married to now, I knew it was not going to be easy. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But at the end of the day, like all of that aside, I am so incredibly in love with this man. Like this is someone who takes care of me. This is someone who does their best to love me. This is someone who does the dishes several days a week when I like just sometimes am just too exhausted to do them. This is someone who like there's so many aspects of our relationship that just like I wouldn't want to pass up just because he happens to be white. You know, like
each other.
Yeah. So like there's just so many good things about our relationship that, you know, I if I had to, even with everything that happened with 2020 and everything like that, if I could do it all over and decide like, oh, maybe I should marry someone different, I wouldn't. I would do it over again.
That's good.
All right.
That's love.
Yes.
And, you know, I just want to, you know, commend you also too, Zyda, because of the tenuous, you know, position that you have been in and, you know, are in and will be in the future with many things. And particularly, you know, dealing with, you know, in-laws who might not understand sometimes. And just, you know, as you said before, initially, whether it was with your, you know, your husband before you got married or just anyone else dealing with people in the white community that, you know, kind of going along to get along, if you will. And just because we have to keep it moving, right? But then when you find yourself in this love relationship, it's like, well, you can't keep it moving here. You have to stand in it, right? And so then all that comes with you standing in this relationship but again, going along initially, but then deciding to stand in your truth. Absolutely. Right? And then when you stood in your truth, then you saw some things, and the things weren't, like you thought they were and had hoped that they were. And, being able to navigate that in a sensitive way, because this is your husband's people, right? And that's a big deal, right? And so being able to successfully navigate that and stand your ground, maintain the love in your relationship, and not allow all of that to get so convoluted where, because some people would be like, we're giving the side eye, like, I don't know if I can do this because this is too much. I didn't sign up for all this, all that. But when we take these vows, right, it's for good, for better or for worse. Well, if this is one of the worst. So do you give up? No, right? Not if you truly mean your vows. But again, you can, because you have the right to do whatever you want. But
I got the option.
Meaningful were those vows, right? And so, and then so not only possibly you giving the side eye, now you standing in your truth. Your in-laws could be saying, giving you the side eye, like, where's this person coming from? This is not what we met before, right? When you were just holding things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's just a lot of dynamics that, are going on the surface, under the surface, between the surface, that you continually have to navigate. Being the only one, right? Like you were saying before, you don't go in for a fight, you're the only one. And so, but nonetheless, it sounds like you are learning, have learned, and will continue to go through the process of standing your ground firmly, but without being, so the angry Black woman, even though it may seem like that to some people, but that's not what it is. It's just that, one, I'm passionate about what I believe in. And some people mistake passion for anger, right? That's been mistaken with me in instances, right? Because they don't understand. But also, too, is I have this right. Just like you have this right, I have this right. And because you were offended by my right, that's not my fault. Because, I am offended by what you consider your rights. Right. And so there's a delicate balance that you've been navigating and continue to navigate. And from what I'm hearing, it is not easy. And I can imagine that it's not easy. So long way to say that I commend you for navigating that, as successfully as you have, and maintaining your love for your marriage, for your husband, and wanting to remain together as opposed to just, what, this is too much.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Miss Sharon. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, Egypt was right. We have to end. Unfortunately, because this is a great conversation.
Really
great conversation. But Zyda, will you come back and join us for a part 2?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
I want to steal you and make you another co-host.
Okay.
Because you bring so much to the table. Just like Egypt just joined us last week was his first day on the show as a co-host, because he was on the show once before and just like, blew us
did
away.
Such a phenomenal job.
Whatever, so I already knew that. So okay, so Zyda has agreed to come back. And we so welcome you and look forward to it. So you just let me know a date. It's Wednesdays at 8:00. Let me know if you want to do September, October, whatever works for you. We'll sign you up for that date, and it'll be a done deal.
So you
ladies
guys
and gentlemen,
questions that you want to ask me in part
Oh
2.
yeah, we're gonna write them down. Trust me.
And don't forget to follow Zyda at Mellon_eats on her IG page. Listen, you're going to salivate. But you don't do catering or anything like that, do you? You just cook for your family?
I'll be too tired. Thanksgiving is my catering.
Okay, so just salivate, no orders. That's Mellon with 2 L's _eats on IG. That is her page. Thank you so much, Zyda, for joining me. Thank you, co-host, for being a part of this show today and every week. I so appreciate you. And join us next Wednesday at 8 p.m. for a live episode of Race Matters, where we talk about the current events that have been going on for the past month or so that involve race. You want to definitely stay tuned on that, because we update you with all the racial matters in the news. I mean, well, not all the ones we can fit in, because we know there's so many, right? But the ones that we handpick that we think you want to be updated on and or know about. So join us next Wednesday for that episode. So we love you. Have a great God evening, God week. We love you. God bless you all. Shalom. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Shalom.
Yes. Shalom, everyone.
Bye.